So I think it's just us. How do we let people in now? Attendees? Oh,
Maybe it's just automatic.
hello, everyone. I think that we have folks coming on into the webinar right now. We're going to give it a few more moments just to make sure that we have folks entering, and we will start momentarily.
I'm going to share screen now just so we're set up for when we go, if that's okay.
Of course. All right, it kind of looks like most folks are entering the room. I want to say a good afternoon to everyone. My name is Ashley Brazel. I'm the Associate Director of New Student Family Programs, and I'm really excited to introduce our Family UChat presenter today, and that's Alicia Brennan. So Alicia is our Director of Student Success Persistence Programs and Advising Support. So I'm going to hand it over to her. She has a presentation, and once the presentation is over, we will have time for Q&A. So at the end, feel free to utilize that Q&A and we will be happy to answer some questions. So I will pass it over to Alicia.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And if you've not said anything, so I assume that everything looks good on the screen share for my presentation. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here with me this afternoon, everyone. As Ashley said, my name is Alicia Brennan. I serve as the Director of Student Success Persistence Programs and Advising Support here at UMass's Undergraduate Student Success Center. And I am here to talk about all things academic advising and course registration today, sort of pulling out, pulling off the veil, looking behind the curtain of what does this all look like at UMass Amherst. And it is a very busy time of year. We are definitely in the thick of advising, and our seniors are starting to register on Monday and today. So it's a very, very busy time of year for students as well as our academic advisors. And we're going to talk about all of that and more. Just to give you a little bit of a background on me and sort of my perspective on this work, I've been in student success for about 4 years at this point. My current role really heavily involves working with the advising community. My team does a lot of professional development and training and support for this group. So making sure that they have the knowledge and this do this advising work with students really well. But I also, prior to moving into this role, spent about 10 years here on campus as an academic advisor, doing all of the things that we're going to talk about today that advisors do to support this process for students. And I was primarily in our College of Social Behavioral Sciences. So shout out to any students or any folks that have students in SBS and my whole advising crew from SBS as well. So a little bit about sort of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start with an overview of the Undergraduate Student Success Center to give you a sense of the team that I work with and the work that we do sort of beyond advising support on campus. I'll talk about how families and supporters can support students through this time of advising and course planning. I'll talk a little bit about academic advising at UMass Amherst, how it's structured, because it obviously looks a little bit different than a high school setting or even other institutions for some of our transfer students. So just to provide you sort of a blueprint of what that looks like at UMass. And then we will talk about preparing for spring advising and course registration. So all the things that students can and should be doing now before they actually go in to enroll in classes. This is the space that most of our students are in right now. Like I said, Monday and today are the sort of the first days that our seniors are onboarding into enrollment, but every other student is registering sort of starting next week, between next week and the Thanksgiving break week. So this is really the space that most students are in. And then we'll wrap up with sort of an overview of actually registering for courses, what that process looks like, what students need to do. And then we will jump into questions from you all. So I'll start, like I said, with an overview of the Undergraduate Student Success Center, which is where I work. So we are a unit that intentionally sits at this crossroads of academic affairs and student affairs here at UMass. So we do house support for academic advising. Like I said before, much of that lives with my team, but we also have a lot of other programs and initiatives that are student facing that I'll just take a couple minutes to provide some information about. So we do have a peer-to-peer financial literacy program called Smart About Money. We also have what we call the Student Success Academic Planner. That is a monthly online resource on our website that helps students get organized, manage their time well, and set and achieve goals. We also oversee and provide administration for two programs that students can take advantage of to study outside of UMass Amherst. So the first is domestic exchange. So it's an opportunity for a student to spend a semester or a year at one of over 170 other institutions in the United States, as well as Puerto Rico and Guam. Often this is at no additional cost beyond what they are paying to be here at UMass as a UMass student. And we also have our 5 college interchange program that we oversee, which is an opportunity for UMass students to take courses at the other 4 colleges in our 5 college consortium. So that's Hampshire, Amherst, Smith, and Mount Holyoke colleges, again, for no additional cost beyond their cost of attendance at UMass. We also oversee our residential academic programs or RAPs and our first year seminars and transfer success seminars. So anyone on the call that has a first year student at UMass, maybe they're in a RAP, maybe you've heard about their RAP course, or the students that they're living on the floor, they're also in the RAP. If you have a first year student, they also should be enrolled in a first year seminar where they're with other first year students in a really small class, kind of learning how to navigate UMass. And for any new incoming transfer students, we have a similar seminar that's kind of focused on transitioning specifically to UMass. Lastly, we also have a variety of outreach and supports for our first gen and our transfer student communities. That looks like newsletters and events and other initiatives to support students. In the middle of October, we had our transfer week. So we had a whole week of events and activities for all of our transfer students on campus. And last week was what we call First Connections Week, which is the same, a week of activities and events for our first generation students. You can find more information about any of the things that I talked about or the other things that we do that I don't have time to talk about today on our website. It's umass.edu/student success, or you can follow us on Instagram at Success at UMass. We are constantly posting about all the cool things that we are doing, reposting things from across campus. So it's a good sort of insight into what's going on in the student success world at UMass. Okay, so transitioning into sort of the topic at hand today, which is this idea of advising in course registration, what this looks like, and what you all as family and supporters can do to support your students through this process. So I'll just start by acknowledging that I know today that I'm speaking to multiple perspectives here. We have folks on the call who are likely have new first year students here at UMass or new transfer students here at UMass that are either sort of they're managing this for the first time. This process looks different than what the advising in course registration process looks like over the summer for our new students. So maybe you're here to kind of get a sense of what this looks like compared to the high school process that you're used to or compared to your students' previous higher education institution, which is really great. We also maybe have folks where their students are returning students. They've done this process once or twice before. They're navigating that well, perhaps, but you're here to learn a little bit more about what this looks like. So perhaps you can have additional levels of support for your student through this process moving forward. So all of that is really great, regardless of which perspective you're coming from. We're really happy to have you here today to talk more about all of this. So I have basically two guiding questions for sort of the beginning of this session as we move forward. So the first is we're really going to talk about this idea of how is advising in course registration different from students' previous experiences in either high school or another higher ed institution for our transfer students. And then we're also going to talk about what you can do as a family and support members to support your student throughout this process. And we'll start with the second question of what can you all do to support your student through this process. So the first thing that we like to talk about is this idea of supporting your student in the driver's seat of this process. So students are ultimately the ones who are selecting courses, they're making those choices, they're, weighing out different options or looking at different times that courses are offered. Yes, they're doing this with really good guidance and support from advisors, but ultimately an advisor's perspective is really students are really in the driver's seat to make these decisions. We are there to guide, and sort of bringing that same lens to your conversations with students, I think is also really helpful. We also want to encourage agency and follow through and curiosity from students. Going back to the idea of student in the driver's seat, really this idea of developing student agency, that these are their decisions to make and to think through, that they are the ones that know themselves the best, and are best equipped to really think through all these different decisions and make and sort of choose the ultimate way to go. We also want to encourage follow through. Again, students being in the driver's seat, they are the one that need to take the initiative on these pieces to sort of do the next step and the next step, and we can be there to support and to guide. But ultimately, again, they're the ones that need to make that follow through. And then lastly, this idea of curiosity, and I think we like to cultivate curiosity in students for a lot of different reasons, but in this context, I really think about it as curiosity for what's possible for your time at UMass. Maybe that's something like, I don't know, I never really thought it would be possible to study abroad or go on domestic exchange, but I've heard that like it is more financially feasible than I thought, or I've heard that it's more flexible academically than I thought, to encourage that level of curiosity to learn more. It also could be curiosity about a specific course. Maybe it's, I've always been really interested in art history, and I'm going to take that art history class as my gen ed or this elective space that I have. So really nurturing that level of curiosity for students to explore all the different things that UMass has, both academically and in terms of co-curriculars. And then finally, this idea of prioritizing asking questions rather than providing answers to help students define goals, think through the decisions, and make meaning of their experience. This is really, again, the perspective that academic advisors take. Advisors really think of their work as like my job as a student is kind of mulling over decisions or trying to, you need support making a decision, is to provide all the different options, to kind of lay those on the table and ask questions to help them understand which road or which path is going to be the best for them. So ultimately, again, it really comes back to this idea of students are in the driver's seat. We are there to support them, to ask those good questions, rather than sort of jumping to that solution or answering that question really quickly. Okay, so as promised, I will start by talking a little bit about the structure of academic advising at UMass Amherst, so you can sort of get a sense of what that looks like here. So every major or program is associated with a school or a college. So program primarily meaning our exploratory track programs or ET programs for any first year students that have not declared a major yet. So every major or ET program is associated with a school or college. The way we talk about schools and colleges to students is sort of this idea of like UMass is the city and your school or college is the neighborhood. So it's really a way of sort of organizing the university academically and making it feel a little bit smaller for students. So we really encourage this idea of a student's school or college as their academic home base. When in doubt, your school college advising center, which every school or college has a central advising center, is really the place to go if you have questions. If they are not the folks to answer that for you, they can help you find the right person that is. In terms of how advising or advisor assignments are structured, every student has a primary or only major for students that don't have multiple majors. So every student is going to have either an individual advisor or a team of advisors. Different programs, different major structure it differently, but they'll have one or multiple people that are sort of their go-to advisor that they are going to meet with around all things connected to that major or program. For students that maybe have a double major, so we call that secondary majors here, they will have the equivalent in that second major. So if I'm a primary major in communication and a secondary major in sociology, I'm going to have two separate advisors. So one for my communication major and one for my sociology major. And then any students who have minors or certificates or any sort of other credentials, they will have additional advisors associated with those programs as well. So as you can see, some students, every student is going to have at least one advisor or one team of advisors, and some students have multiple advisors or multiple teams of advisors, depending on how many programs they have, how many majors, how many minors. So this can be sort of a larger group of folks, and students can be meeting with multiple advisors across their programs, or it can be one advisor for their one major, and they're having one conversation in preparation for course registration. We also have what we call supplemental advising. So these are advising for things that are not majors, so things like pre-health or pre-med or pre-law. They're not majors here at UMass, but we know that there is a kind of a specific advising and course registration need for students to take the correct courses in the correct sequence in order to apply to law school or med school, as well as support around things like, when students are actually applying to these programs, et cetera. We also have an honors college here on campus. So if anyone has a student who is in our Commonwealth Honors College, there's a team of advisors associated with honors that are there to talk students through all of honors requirements, make sure that they're completing those as well, registering for their correct courses, and helping them think through sort of the thesis when that time comes as well. And then for anyone who has a student who's a varsity athlete here on campus, we have our athletics academic success team. They have academic counselors that are assigned individually to individual varsity student athletes, and those students are meeting with their academic advisor in their major or program, and also meeting with their academic counselor in athletics to make decisions about courses for the next semester, particularly thinking about needs around, game travel, practices, things like that. So now thinking a little bit more specifically about this idea of preparing for spring advising and course registration. So like I said, this is really the space that most of our students are in right now. Anyone who is not a current senior is really in this space of this preparation time. So the first thing that we encourage students to do in sort of preparing for advising in course registration is to log into Spire. This is our student information system. They can log in with the same net ID and password that they log into Canvas, our LMS system, or their UMass email. So they should be familiar with that login. It's the same login to access Spire, and we encourage them to look at what we call registration hold. So these are anything that can prevent a student from enrolling in classes. It can be things like some programs require students to meet with an advisor before they enroll in classes. So it could be that you haven't met with your advisor yet. You need to schedule that appointment for the advisor to remove the hold. It can also be things like an unpaid balance to the university, or parking ticket that's unpaid. So it can be a variety of different things, but ultimately all of these registration holds prevent students from registering for classes on time, which we want them to do. So we encourage students to take a look at that early and then resolve those holds before their enrollment appointment. An enrollment appointment is just sort of a complicated name for the exact date and time that a student can start registering for classes. So perhaps, if I'm a senior, I might log into Spire and see that as of today, November 12th at 2 p.m., that's when I can start enrolling in classes. So that means that when that time comes, that's when I want to be logging into Spire or Schedule Builder to actually enroll in classes, or to do that as quickly as I possibly can. So we encourage students to check that date and time early, add that to their calendar, and be prepared to enroll in classes as soon as they can after their time comes up. I'll also mention that we don't ever sort of close enrollment at any time between now and the end of add drop for the spring. So once a student's enrollment appointment opens, so today, if I could start enrolling at 2 p.m., I have between today at 2 p.m. and the last day of add drop for the spring semester, which is like early February, to enroll in classes, to add, drop, swap, etc. So it's a sort of a continuous process until the end of add drop. We never shut that down for a period of time between the semesters. We also encourage students to sort of, before they meet with their advisor, to review spring classes in Spire. So sort of look at their academic requirements report, which is something that they can access in Spire. It lists all of their general education requirements, all of their major requirements. It keeps track of their total number of credits to hit the 120 minimum required to graduate, and to get a sense of maybe what they're thinking about for classes. So add some things to your shopping cart, give your advisor advisor a place to start as part of that conversation. Students can either use Spire, there's something called the shopping cart, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of a little holding chamber for classes of interest that you can keep them all in one place and sort of look at them there and enroll from that page. Or we also have something called Schedule Builder, which is just another way to search for and add classes. It's a lot more visual than Spire. So for students that kind of like to see, I want to see the weekly grid of like, what is Monday? What do my Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes look like? My Tuesday, Thursday? I want to see the whole week visually. It lets you do that rather than having to like take a piece of paper and write down the times and sort of do it yourself. And it also, you can add courses in there. Like here are the five classes I'm interested in, and it will generate optional schedules for you. So maybe there's like multiple sections of a class or a class with multiple discussion sections. It'll feed you up like here are the 100 different schedules that you could choose from that include different versions of these 5 classes that you selected. So some students like that sort of like visual way of like shopping around for a perfect schedule. Um, we also encourage students at this point to watch for an email from their advisor or from their school college advising office. Those emails, a lot of them should have already gone out. Some programs sort of do this and they start with their seniors and move to their first year students. So some students still maybe have not heard yet, but will very soon. This is really an email that will provide students information of like it's time, registration for the spring is happening. This is the time to schedule with an advisor, and it will include either a link to make an appointment online or information about how to schedule that appointment. And then we really encourage students, the last thing as part of this prep is to schedule that advising appointment with their advisor. It's helpful to schedule that sort of several days before the actual enrollment appointment. It gives students a couple days to take the information that they had from their advisor and kind of go back and look at courses again, get everything in their shopping cart or get everything into Schedule Builder ahead of time. So when they go to enroll, they sort of know what the plan is and everything is sitting there. And it's really, really quick to just click the classes you want or click the schedule you want and enroll. I'll also say a lot of, what will happen in this advising appointment is obviously about courses for the spring, registration for spring in particular, degree progression, this idea of, here's your graduation term, here's where you are now, here's how this next semester that we're talking about is moving you forward towards that graduation term, but it's also a really good space to discuss longer term planning and goals and how those things might relate to course selection for the next semester as well. So things like, I'm thinking about studying abroad as a junior, or I'm thinking about going on co-op or doing an internship in the future. I'm thinking about adding another major. All of those things I think are much more doable for students or for most students than they think. It's really helpful to have those conversations as early as possible. So an advisor can really think about, okay, you have this many semesters left to complete your major here with us, but we want to think about this, spring semester junior year for study abroad, and here are the courses you might want to save for that. Or, oh, you're thinking about adding another degree. Okay, let's look, or another major. Let's look at that and see how those things might make sense. So really thinking about the connection. I think these are good appointments to really think about the connection between like the next step in that degree progression, but also thinking about that next step in relation to a lot of these larger academic goals. And then finally, a really helpful resource that we have for this planning process is our undergraduate catalog, which is called the Guide to Undergraduate Programs. It's accessible to anybody. If you Google UMass Guide to Undergraduate Programs, you can access it. It lists all of our programs, so all of our majors, our minors, our certificates, and it has information about them. So all the courses that are the students required to take to complete that major. And there's also a page called Getting Started for all of our majors, which lists if you are a student, maybe you're thinking about adding a second major or changing your major. It lists what are the introductory courses? Where would someone start if they are thinking about pursuing this major or changing this major or adding this major? So it's a really nice place for a student if they're thinking about adding majors or changing majors. Go to that page ahead of the advising appointment, sort of see what's there, maybe add some of those introductory courses into their shopping cart, Inspire, or into Schedule Builder. Jot down a couple questions that maybe they have for the advisor ahead of time. And then finally, we are here at spring course registration. So, what does this actual process look like? So, again, sort of the first step here is really going back to this idea of being prepared, but it's using Spire, the Spire shopping cart or schedule builder to get organized. So, again, we encourage students to do that before they meet with an advisor, and then I would say I would encourage students to do this process again after they've met with their advisor. Maybe some things need to shift. Maybe a student wanted to take this course, but oh, now it's already filled by the time I'm enrolling. Or no, your advisor says that's really a better junior course. Here's a better sophomore course. So really kind of making some of those tweaks based on that conversation with advisors, making sure that you've got in your shopping cart Inspire. You've got all the courses that you want to enroll in. You've kind of got a plan. You've got some backup courses in case some things fill up, or you have in Schedule Builder kind of your ideal schedule that you've selected that you're going to enroll in. So then again, when that enrollment appointment opens, so that day and time when students can start enrolling, we encourage them to either log into Spire or Schedule Builder and enroll in courses. If you've done all of the prep work ahead of time to kind of get prepared, to get everything ready, to have backup courses or backup schedules, this should be the quickest part of the entire process. It's really just clicking enroll or clicking a couple buttons and sort of going through that process to get the little, green check marks that say that everything went well. So again, it's really a lot of this work is in the prep, and the enrollment, if that prep is done well, should be actually a really quick experience. And then we encourage students after they've gone through that enrollment process to reconnect with their advisor if needed. Maybe a course, fill like a course is full, and a student doesn't have a good backup to that, and they're writing to their advisor to say, hey, this filled. What's another course that I could think about? Or hey, I really had, my goals have changed or my plans have changed for next semester for the future. Can we have another conversation about how my course enrollment for the spring might look differently? And again, students have until the end of the add drop period to add drop or swap. That date is incorrect. I missed that in my updating of slides. That is the last spring. That's the last spring add drop, and I can look up what it is this year. But it's not February 5th. So my apologies for missing that update. But again, they've got the entire rest of the fall semester and all through winter and through that first week of classes in the spring to make changes to classes. So we really encourage students to do this at their enrollment appointment because that's when there are the most options before courses fill. But just know that there's also this longer period of time to sort of refine, to reconnect with advisors as needed. And that is it for me. I am happy to take any questions that folks might have about this process.
Thank you, Alicia. I have a few questions that folks have asked. So
Yes, of course.
the first one, someone asked, my student has had outside credit sent in last week from another school, and that will make them a sophomore. So how can they change the registration appointment to reflect that? Can they?
Yes. So, I will say that's a really great question. So what I will say is that in general, students, we talk about students registering like, oh, what are the first year dates or the sophomore dates? We are talking about credits, not graduation term or admit term. So if a student is in their first year at UMass, but they have credits to be a sophomore, so meaning that they have between, I believe it's 27 and 56 credits as a sophomore, they will register with sophomore. So it goes by their credit total. It doesn't go by their admit term or their graduation term. If for some reason, if a student, again, at the time that the enrollment appointments were assigned, those credits hadn't come through yet and weren't reflected. So at that point of the enrollment appointment assignment, they were a first year student, but now they have things coming through and they're a sophomore. The student can connect with the registrar's office, and somebody can update that for them. Someone can go into the back end of Spire and assign a new enrollment appointment. If students are, if any student is sort of like, I don't know how to connect with the registrar's office, or I'm not really sure what to ask, their advisor is a good person to start with to say, hey, here's what's going on. I was told that I could update my enrollment appointment because now I'm going to be a sophomore by credits. The advisors are really used to this and do this a lot. So starting with that advisor as a point of contact, and the advisor can kind of facilitate that conversation with the registrar's office too.
Awesome. Thank you. Someone said if a student is thinking about changing a major to a different school, who should they potentially meet with for advising?
Yeah. So I feel like this is a really common question. So what I will say is that it is never a bad idea to connect with your assigned advisor, to just sort of let them know I'm thinking about changing my major. Advisors, like I said, advisors use the guide to undergraduate programs really frequently. All of them are working a lot with students that are in this major changing process. So while they may not be an expert in whatever program you want to switch into, they have a lot of practice sort of helping students navigate registration times while they're thinking about changing majors, and they have access to a lot of information and resources about what those major changing processes look like, and they have access to the guide to undergraduate programs to sort of have some initial sense of where a student might be starting. So it's never a bad idea to sort of have that initial conversation. What the change of major process looks like looks really different depending on what the program is. Some programs are what we call open majors, so anyone can declare them. And different programs have different processes for what that looks like. Some, you submit a Google form and they review your record and change you. Some require an information session or something like that. So the actual process looks a little bit different. But your sort of your current advisor can have a conversation with you about what that process looks like for the major that you're interested in. And then assuming it is an open major that you can join relatively quickly, I would also encourage an advising appointment with that person as well. And again, this can sort of straddle the enrollment appointment. That's sort of why I say like it doesn't shut off at some point. You have all of the rest of fall and winter. So it's okay to have an initial conversation with your current advisor now and to sort of think about, yep, I have my plan to get connected to the new major. I know how I'm going to declare it. I know what the likely timeline is. I have some classes that I can put in my shopping cart that are going to relate to that new major. And I sort of know what that process is to have that enrollment appointment, enroll in what you can and what you think makes sense now, change the major, and then have that appointment with the new advisor later. So it's okay if it spans the enrollment appointment, if that needs to happen. But really, yeah, I think starting with that point of contact with the current advisor is sort of a nice just way to open up the conversation and to have somebody guide you, because this is a space where it's a lot of it depends. So it's nice to have somebody that's really kind of fluent in the university to like walk the student through that.
Thank you. Going back to credits, just to confirm, do credits from students' first semesters count, or are credits also coming from high school in that count that you were talking about?
Yeah, so when we talk about credit counts for like the days that students are assigned, it includes their current semester. So it includes credits in progress for this fall, and it includes any credits that students are bringing in previously. So it's any transfer, if they're a transfer student, it's any credits from previous institutions they're bringing in. It's AP credits that have transferred in as credits at UMass, or like dual enrollment, anything like that. So it's including anything that UMass has sort of accepted as credits for here, and their kind of previously taken UMass credits and what they're enrolled in right now for fall.
Someone asked, what happens if a required course for a student that semester is already full?
Yeah. So I would say that there's sort of two buckets of this. I think that in my experience working with students, often I would sort of pitch like, oh, here are the 5 classes that I think that you should enroll in. They're all major requirements. They're all things, that make sense as a sophomore or junior or whatever the student would be. And often I would get a lot of like panicked emails of like, oh my God, accounting 221 is full, like I'm not sure what to do. And I would say that 9 times out of 10 for a lot of the students that I worked with, there was something else that was open that we could substitute. It's like, oh, that's totally fine. Like you can't do accounting in the spring, we'll do it in the fall, or it's really fine. Like a lot of this is sort of like it's loose general guidelines that we can certainly work around and find an alternative course. So I would say the first place that I would start, like if a student cannot get into a class that either they absolutely know is required, like my advisor specifically told me that I absolutely have to take this class in the spring if I'm going to graduate on time, or it's something their advisor recommended to them and they're not really sure whether there's a substitute or not, to start by writing to the advisor and saying, hey, I couldn't get into accounting 221. Can we talk about whether I absolutely need this for the spring and what I should be doing? Or is there an alternative course that I can be enrolling in for the spring? So like I said, much of the time there's an alternative course that a student can enroll in, and an advisor can advise them on that, and the student can go enroll in that course and they can readjust the plan and it's totally fine. There are some situations where the course is full and it's like, nope, you absolutely need this semester in order to graduate on time. Again, that's still a conversation with the advisors. What I will say is that the advisors and your departments and your schools and colleges, they are equally as invested in students enrolling in the courses that they need to enroll in the semester they need to enroll in to graduate on time and for that degree progression. So often there's internal conversations that are happening with departments, the advisors to the faculty, or the academic deans in the colleges to folks in the departments, to sort of figure out what can be done in those situations. And there's a lot of, sort of internal conversations about, we have the student, they really need this class. Can we find a solution? So just to say, again, first point of contact is the advisor. Often they can suggest something else. And if they can't, it's really often sort of internal conversations about how we're going to manage this situation, all moving from this perspective of, we want students to graduate on time and we're really invested in them getting the classes that they need to do that.
Thank you. Kind of going off of that, do you recommend students have backup courses? And when they're enrolling, that they add some backup courses? Do you suggest that?
Oh, in terms of like actually registering for backup courses?
Yeah, how many backup courses would you suggest a student has when they're
Yeah, so I would 100% suggest having backup options before enrolling. And I think that's a good question to ask an advisor, to say, okay, we're talking about these 5 classes. Often advisors, particularly if students are taking major courses, if they've sort of moved out of taking a lot of general education classes, advisors in the departments often have a sense of when things fill. So they can sort of give you a sense often of like, oh no, that's definitely going to be open when you go to enroll. This one is a lit like it could not. Like they often can kind of give you a sense of like what's going to be fine and what maybe you need a backup for. But I would definitely encourage having backups before you enroll. It will just if something fills when you go to enroll for your enrollment appointment, it just lets you automatically move on to that next class rather than having to like scramble to find something else or email your advisor and wait for them to respond to you. So really thinking about having a schedule and having a few backups, I think in planning is really, really helpful. In terms of enrolling in backup courses, I'm not going to say that there's no scenario in which enrolling in quote unquote backup courses doesn't make sense. I think certainly you certainly want to be enrolled in at least 12 credits if you're planning to be a full-time student. It's challenging in terms of if students are enrolled part-time, but they have full-time status, things just get really, really kind of confusing. So full-time students definitely enroll in at least 12 credits, even if you're kind of waiting for some other things to come together. Again, there are some moments where I think enrolling up and backup courses might make sense. Like I'm thinking if somebody's taking, they want to take a 5 college class, that process looks very, very different from our course enrollment, and the timing of that is very, very different. Sometimes students need to wait until add drop to actually enroll the class. That might be a moment where, just given that it's a very different process with a very different timeline, where enrollment isn't guaranteed necessarily, something like that, having a backup option just in case could make a lot of sense. But the other thing I sort of encourage students to think about is that every course that you're holding a seat in as a backup is a course someone else wants that they can't get into. So we try to have students think about, like, there are some examples where I would advise this and it makes sense, but also think about, we don't want a lot of courses to come offline that our first year students need because somebody is holding they're holding 2 classes as backup classes and they don't really need those classes. So, kind of balancing those two things.
Great, thank you. I have some like major specific questions. So the first one is, if someone's son has both an SBS advisor and a political science major advisor, should they talk to both of those advisors before enrolling in classes?
Yeah. So is this a scenario? I don't know if it's as specific in the question, but in general, if students have two advisors, so if they have two majors or they have an honors advisor, they're in they're pursuing pre-med or pre-law, and or they have a minor certificate. So any sort of like multiple credentials, I would encourage folks to meet with both advisors. Our advising system is really structured for each individual advisor to be an expert in their program. So we sort of lean a little bit more into this like expert niche lane rather than a generalist lane in terms of advising. So we structure this as like if you have two majors or two programs, each of your advisors is an expert in that program, and to have two conversations, one with each advisor about those individual programs, and then to kind of make sense of that for enrollment. And advisors can see that students have multiple programs, so they can certainly, over the years I had conversations with double majors like, okay, I have two spaces to do classes in resource economics this semester because my other three classes I need to be taking in marketing. And we can certainly we can work with that and sort of develop a plan, knowing that students are often kind of like splitting their semester between multiple programs.
It sounds like in that situation, this person's son only has one major, but they haven't heard from their major advisor yet, and the student's not sure how to think about college requirements and major requirements.
Mhm.
So what would your suggestion be?
Yeah, so I would say that all of the department advisors like this are also equipped to be talking about gen ed and college level requirements. So they can talk about all of those things, sort of you as we think about university requirements, which are like the 120 credits to graduate, gen eds, as well as the specific college requirements, in this case, the SBS requirements. I would say if you haven't heard from your advisor yet, certainly feel free to reach out to them, to send them an email, and to say that, hey, I know it's time for advising, and I'm sort of looking to make an appointment with you. What's the best way to do that, or the best timing to do that? Folks are also welcome to connect with the like you could connect with the central SBS advising office as well. But I would start with the major advisor, particularly if you know who that person is, to just send them a quick email and say what's the best way to get connected with you for this advising appointment. I'll also say that most advisors, and I know the folks in SBS do for certain, also use our platform called Navigate 360 to schedule advising appointments. So if you Google UMass Navigate 360, there's a page for where students can log in. We have a mobile app, or a desktop version, and there's a scheduling platform within that. So students could also kind of proactively log into Navigate, go to the scheduling feature, and sort of find their major department and book an advising appointment with them as well. And again, if you're sort of unsure what to do or just want to connect with your advisor for next steps, certainly send them an email, I think is the next step. Makes sense.
If students are in BDIC and the interdisciplinary track, how does registration look for them?
Yes. So in terms of, well, I guess maybe I'll ask the clarifying question of, or perhaps not. I'll try to answer, and please let me know if I'm not answering the correct question. So BDIC students are still going to have they'll still have an advisor and an advising structure. So they have somebody that they can meet with to have conversations about courses. They have their plan for their major that they've built of which courses they would like to take when. So they're still going to have that same guidance and that same conversation. When it comes down to registering, I mean, the actual process looks much the same. You log into Spire Schedule Builder, you find courses, you add them to to your cart, you go in and enroll. I think where it gets a little bit more complicated for BDIC students in terms of enrolling is that many courses, particularly as you start getting into upper year courses like 400 level courses for our juniors and seniors, many programs restrict enrollment into those courses to students in their declared major. So like, I worked as a communication advisor for several years, and I worked with communication majors, but also some students who were pursuing BDIC that were taking upper level communication classes. And often those folks were actually working individually with the faculty in the department to say, I'm not a communication major, but I'm BDIC. Here are the communication classes that I want to take towards my degree. Would you let me enroll in this course? So BDIC students, I think often, especially juniors and seniors, are doing a little bit more of that faculty outreach process. They're connecting individually with faculty to say, I'm interested in this course, but I'm not this major, et cetera, and sort of negotiating some of those pieces. But any course that a student sort of meets what we call like the enrollment criteria for, so you've got the prerequisites, or you are the major that it requires, or it doesn't require you to be a particular major. BDIC students can also just go in and enroll for those courses through Spire, and it's for the other courses that maybe it requires being a certain major that they're not. That I would always encourage them to just write to the faculty member and sort of do a little brief description of here's my major, here's why I'm interested in taking this class, and kind of open up a dialogue with the faculty member. And I think in general, faculty are pretty they know generally, I think, what BDIC is, and they've worked with students or had them in their class before. I think they're generally open to the idea of conversations with someone, particularly someone who's really enthusiastic about the course and the subject matter, which I often find our BDIC students to be.
Is there a preferred semester or year for taking study abroad opportunities, and how far ahead can a student plan for that?
Yeah, so I would say the most popular is probably spring of junior year, but there's not necessarily a preferred semester. We have sophomores through seniors who go. I think it's really an individual decision. There's a lot of different factors. Sort of the individual student is a factor, their major is a factor, other things that they're trying to accomplish. If you're a senior in the honors college, it can be more complicated to go abroad as a senior, for example, because you're working on your thesis. It's not impossible. There are ways to do this. They work with students all the time that do it, but just to say it makes it a little bit more complex, perhaps, than a different semester. Other programs, it may be no, sophomore year really is the time to go, because junior year, you need to be working in, this lab or that lab, as part of your co-curricular experience, that you're saying that you're really interested in this kind of research experience. So it really depends on the student and the major and a lot of different factors. So just to say that, I would say explore, be open if you can be open, and sort of have conversations with advisors, and the folks in undergraduate no education abroad in our Office of Global Affairs, to say, what semesters kind of make sense for me academically, or depending on where I want to go in the world. And I always tell students it's never too early to start thinking about it. Most students, in terms of like the actual work, in terms of applying, like choosing a program that you're going to apply to, getting courses approved and all of that happens the semester before you go. So much of the work kind of sits in that space for students, but it's never too early to start thinking about it. Like if you are a first year student, or a second year student, and you're thinking about going abroad junior or senior year, go now. Have a conversation with your advisor this registration season to say, I'm really interested in studying abroad. What semesters could make sense for me to go? Do I have a lot of options? Is there one semester that really is the time to go for my major? And then meet with folks in education abroad. They have a great peer advising program where students start. They're all students that have been abroad before. They can kind of help students search for programs, narrow some things down, talk to them about some of the specifics of what this looks like, and just kind of do all of that kind of prep or thinking work a lot ahead of time. Give yourself a year to sort of think about it and do research. So never too early to start. Advisors love when folks are planning ahead and they can kind of do these 4-year plans, like with first year students. Like they're really happy to do that.
Thank you. I will also say, as a shout out, we will have a Family U chat specifically about studying abroad and supporting your students. So keep an eye out for that if you have more questions. All right, so this is a longer question.
Okay.
So if a student has enough credits to be in the next level, so maybe like a fourth semester, enrolling a student with enough credits to be a junior, are they better off registering with the sophomores than getting the advisor to change them to a junior for scheduling? Specifically, do some classes have seats for sophomores and the student would be at the front of the sophomores, but at the end of the juniors registering? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So that is definitely true. That certain courses have enrollment restrictions that are based on the class year. So certain classes are only open to juniors or only open to sophomores or only open to first year students. You can certainly have a conversation with your advisor about that. My guess is that some departments employ those kinds of restrictions more than others employ them. So you can certainly have a conversation with an advisor to see whether, whether they have an opinion in your specific major or circumstance. My general thought is that I would say generally it's still probably advantageous to register earlier rather than later if you can get a junior enrollment appointment because you're a junior by credits. Often, there is a benefit to doing that in terms of course selection. Anything that you need to be in, say there is a course that's a major requirement and it's only open to first year and second year students, talk to your advisor about that. If it's a department course, they can get you into that. If it's a gen ed course, they can often work with the registrar's office to enroll folks in some of those classes. So have a conversation with your advisor to see if there's any nuances that, about your particular situation. But in general, I think it's often the pros kind of outweigh the cons often, I think, to register earlier if you can.
Thank you. All right. So the next question is, what if a student fails a class this semester and it needs to be taken over again, but they don't have their official grade yet until grades come out?
Yes. So if a student is like pretty certain that they're not going to pass a class or even uncertain if they will pass, you can certainly register for a retake now. Like there's nothing in Spire that will prevent you from doing that. So if I'm concerned I'm gonna fail Math 131 and I want to, get my first choice of sections right now and I want to enroll in 131 for the spring again to kind of hedge my bets, certainly you can do that. I would just say, grades are going to post right before Thanksgiving or not Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's that week of Christmas is when grades will post for the fall. So certainly would encourage a student to check that grade kind of as quickly as possible. And then if they do end up failing, great, you're already enrolled in the retake. And if you do pass or you pass with the grade that you need to sort of move on, depending on your major, then you can always switch it at that point. You can go in, oh, I passed Math 131. I actually want to be in Math 132. So you can go in and make that switch now, but there's nothing that will stop you from proactively registering for the retake if that's what you'd like to do. But I would certainly, again, I feel like every answer I have comes back to talk to your advisor, which is really just, they're kind of like the superheroes of campus when it comes to academics. But also you could have a preemptive conversation with your advisor of like, hey, I'm not really sure I'm going to pass Math 131. I'm thinking about of enrolling in the retake right now. What do you think about that? Get their 2 cents on it as well. And then obviously you can connect with them early in the winter. Like our advisors are back in January. They're available to meet with students, connect with them again after you have a final grade to say, hey, this is how it played out. I just want to check in with you again about kind of the way forward.
Thank you. If a student is looking to take a future course at one of the consortium colleges, like Amherst College, what is the best way to navigate that in regards to process and timing with the two colleges?
In terms of sort of managing the enrollment between UMass and the Five College. So I will say that one of the biggest difference, so I've sort of said that the two processes are very different. One of the biggest ways that they are different is I've talked a lot about the idea that UMass Amherst enrollment, we never close it at any period between sort of like when a student's enrollment appointment opens and the end of add drop. It's continuous enrollment add drop swap. The Five College registration works differently because some of the Five Colleges don't have that same process. Some have a pre-registration period that closes and then sort of an add drop period that opens up later. So there's two distinct periods for registration for a Five College. One is right now. It started last week and it will go through, no, it started this week. It started yesterday and it will continue through the 21st of November. That is what we call the pre-registration period. So students, this is also not mapped on at all to their UMass enrollment appointment. So if you're a first year student and you're registering for UMass classes on the 22nd of November, now is still your 2 weeks to do Five College pre-registration. So it's these 2 weeks regardless of your class year. So students can go into Spire. They can make enrollment requests that go to folks on my team to review. At this point, we're really looking at prerequisites, so we're not moving anything forward that students don't have the prerequisites for, and then we're sending those enrollment requests over to the other colleges. So the other colleges ultimately make the decision about enrolling the student at this point. A lot of that has to do with, they're balancing their own students' enrollment needs with Five College student enrollment needs. But there is sort of this process during pre-registration. Then everything shuts down and it opens again during add drop. And there's a 2 week period at the beginning of every semester where students can then again enroll in classes. At that point, it's instructor permission. So students are inquiring with the particular instructor, I'm interested in enrolling in this course. As long as they get instructor permission via email, we'll process that and we'll process that enrollment essentially. Again, there's always caveats to some of these like very particular things, but in general, that's how it works. Instructor gives permission, and we move forward with enrollment for students. Let me see if I can find very quickly. I was going to try to see if I could find. There's an email for Five College that I was going to see if I could try to find, but I don't need to hold this up. But there's an email for Five College, and if students have any kinds of questions about Five College enrollment, they can write to that. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Oh, here we go. Is there a chat that I can put this in? Does the
Yeah,
chat work?
Yes, I will now change it so everyone can get
Oh, there we go. Okay. I think this should work. So Five College Reg at acad.umass.edu. That is our Five College interchange email address. It is answered by a staff member on my team who is very experienced and manages this process every semester. So if there's ever questions that students have about this process, because to be quite honest, like there's a lot of nuance. It looks very different than the UMass process. Students really, I think, benefit from a conversation with Sheila, the staff member on my team, about some of the nuances, and she can certainly talk through sort of what this looks like and what the process and steps are, help them troubleshoot. So for any students who are new to this and are really a little bit like, I'm interested, but I'm really uncertain of how this looks, reaching out to Sheila is really helpful. Sheila also has appointment availability in Navigate 360 that I mentioned, and she has appointment reasons to meet with students for Five College interchange. So folks can also log in to Navigate and schedule appointments with her there. Or again, writing to her, she'd be happy to pass along the scheduling link as well if folks need a point in the right direction on how to find that. But really, like I said, there's so many nuances and specifics. Have a conversation with Sheila, and she can certainly talk through all the details.
Thank you. I do want to be mindful of time. We have a couple more questions. Someone said thank you for the Five College registration information. I'm going to try and do more like a rapid fire before we close out. But someone to confirm, should a student talk to the assigned advisor for applying for another minor or major?
Yes, I think in general, I would say, I think starting with your current advisor and just having a conversation about, I'm thinking about changing my major to this major. That advisor, like I said, folks have access to things like the Guide to Undergraduate Programs. They can look at the information that's online. They're not going to be an expert in that program, but often they sort of know where to look. They can get you started on the right track. So I think it's a good idea to start there and to have that initial conversation, particularly if you really don't know, like, I don't know how to declare this major. I don't know whether it's an open major or not. I don't know what the process is. I don't know what classes I'm supposed to be taking for this program. If you're feeling a little bit lost in that way. It can be a good kind of initial guiding conversation of, okay, here's the process to declare that major. Let's talk that through. Let's look at the guide of undergraduate programs together. Let's see if there's a couple classes that we can kind of initially put into your shopping cart for the spring. And then knowing that there will be sort of a second, like a major declaration process, assuming it is an open major that will happen hopefully very quickly after that advising conversation, and then a second conversation with that major advisor for the new major to have a really detailed conversation with an expert about, yes, these courses are the ones that you want to be in. Let's make sure that you're on track here. But again, I think the current advisor is a good sort of guide through that process, because like I said, it really depends on what major you're going to and some of the specifics, and it gets kind of complicated really fast. And you don't need to do it alone as a student. Your advisor can help navigate that with you.
Thank you. Someone wants to know, can parents have access to a Student Spire account?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't think that there's any, like, I know that for finances, there's ways that families or other folks can have access to Spire to see financial information. There's no way that I know of for parents to have like a Spire, like a parent Spire login. So I think we're coming back to a conversation with your student about course enrollment and what they're thinking about for the semester. Certainly students, if to have a conversation with you, like they could certainly log in and you all could look at that together if they're comfortable with that. But yeah, it would be a conversation with your student and sort of them logging in and having a dialogue with you about it.
Before I have one more question, but before folks start leaving, someone did ask if you were willing to provide your contact information.
Oh, sure.
Any specific questions, especially if advisors were unable to answer so far, they would, if you don't mind, if you could share it in the chat.
Of course.
Thank you. I know folks are heading out. Thank you. And then the last question that I have is, so I'm going to share it with everyone. Is it possible to is double major available for computer science students? If you're a computer science major, can you double major?
Yes, I know that there are many, many, many computer science students with double majors. I think there's, as you can imagine, there's some sort of frequent combos in math and statistics and things like that. But yes, you can absolutely double major with computer science, and there are many, many computer science students that do have two majors.
And those are all the questions that we have for today. And I know it's time to wrap up. So I want to thank everyone that joined us today. And thank you to Alicia. This is really helpful, timely information. So hopefully you all got a lot of information and questions answered. And I don't know if you have any final parting words, Alicia, before we wrap up.
No, just thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you all for your time during lunch on this Wednesday. I hope this was helpful. In terms of parting words, like this is, there's a lot going on at this time of the semester for students. It's right before holiday break. Everyone's kind of looking forward to a little bit of time off after midterms. And all of that. They're thinking about the next semester. It's busy. There's a lot happening. But just to say that there are so many people, the advisors I spoke about, Ashley's team, my team, and undergraduate student success